Um, okay, thank you so much. Good evening and a very warm welcome to all of you here present, wherever you are in the world. On behalf of the host, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you to our amazing series of talks. This year, we've tagged it Powering Possibilities, Technology, Trade, and the Future of Human Development in our annual Remember to Remember series. You're very welcome. I am Dr. Ike Uhumuavbi, and I'll be guiding you through the conversations this evening. If you take a look around you, you see the power of technology. We are all seated in different parts of the world, assessing this program this evening. The power of technology sits at the heart of our conversation this evening. And by virtue of that, we seek to explore questions on how we are all connected by technology with a goal of advancing human development and intellectual enterprise. AI and other emerging technologies are opening new frontiers in every sector and industry. Technology is providing unique ways of engaging customers as well as movement of products and services. These are some of the issues that we intend to engage this evening in our conversation. We have our special guest here present that will be introduced. Without much ado, please, ladies and gentlemen, I want to hand over to Uwa Salome to read the citation of our special guest as we proceed on this journey. Thank you very much. Uwa Salome, please.
Good evening, everybody. I call on the ambassador for today, Qamar Abbas. Hello, Abbas.
Hello,
Can you go on to
Salome.
introduce for our speaker?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes,
Yes, we can.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much, Dr. Celestine, for providing me this opportunity to introduce such a legend. Professor Tony Hines, distinguished author and influential speaker, is the strategic mind behind Chain Reaction, the acclaimed podcast dissecting supply chain advantage. His book, Supply Chain Strategies, Demand-Driven and Customer-Focused, and his insightful orations illuminate the complexities of supply chains, guiding businesses toward competitive success. He edits the quarterly review, Supply Chain Advantage, and is a contributing writer to Consuming Future. He contributed to the House of Lords inquiry about advertising in the digital age. He was the keynote speaker at CSCMP in Spain and has been featured in leading newspapers and on BBC Radio for speaking about retailing. He also featured in a webinar about the future of advertising for the International News Media Association, INMA. Tune into the weekly podcast Chain Reaction for in-depth discussions on achieving supply chain advantage and subscribe on your favorite platform. Visit and follow Tony Hines' blog for the latest insights on making sense of business. Feel free to connect for more insights. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much for that citation. Professor Tony Hines, the floor is now yours, sir. You're most welcome.
Well, thank you very much for that very excellent introduction. Nice to meet everyone this evening. And I'd just like to say good evening to my distinguished audience. You are my customers today. And everything I prepared is for you to help you understand the central part supply chains play in every aspect of our daily existence. I first of all want to thank Professor Celestine Uhumuavbi for inviting me to speak to you about the topic close to my heart, supply chain strategies, demand-driven and customer-focused. And what a great program that's been pulled together by everybody at the Greater Manchester University. It's a fabulous program. I looked through the whole program and I think it's very interesting. Oh, to be a student again, I think. You've got a great opportunity to listen to all the speakers in November to remember. And I note I'm here on Bonfire Night. It's Bonfire Night here in the UK. And I hope that the only way in which that's symbolic is to perhaps light your fire of enthusiasm to learn more about supply chain strategies and global trade. And what a relief that my name isn't Guy. That's the only thing I'd say at the start. I'm going to begin by setting the context, and I'm going to switch over to my slide pack right now. And there'll be opportunities for everyone to ask questions towards the end of the presentation. But in the meantime, I'm going to switch over, if I can, to share my screen. So I'll try and do that. Let's just see. I don't know if my screen has come up yet. Share. Right.
Yes, it's coming up now.
It's coming up, is it? Right, okay. And I need to just go over to the presentation view. So give me a second to do that. And let me get that sorted. I've got the presentation view on now, so hopefully you can see the screen with everything there. And I'm going to talk about supply chain strategies, demand-driven and customer-focused. And that, of course, is the title of my book too, which you can see there on your screen. And that's published by Routledge, and it's now in its 3rd edition. So I don't know if you've accessed that. If you're interested in supply chains, I think it's a really good resource, but I would, wouldn't I? Because I wrote it. So I hope you'll access it if you haven't already done so, if you're interested in this topic. Let's set the context, though, for tonight's discussion, which I hope you'll find informative and on message for your talk, because we're talking about powering the future and how we do that. We've already heard about how AI is powering the future. It's powering the now too. And it's powering supply chain strategies. And I'm going to talk and relate to that particular thing. But before we start, I just want to say, we go to the supermarket. We pick up our favorite products. We enter the store with hope and anticipation about a wonderful meal we're about to create back home. As we maneuver through the aisles, we search for the aisle in which we think our product is located. After a few minutes, with luck, we track down a store employee because we can't find what we actually want. And we ask them where the product is located. They guide us to where they think it should be. But the disappointment when we get there, the shelf's empty. So what's gone wrong? That's the first question, isn't it? Did a recent store promotion increase demand and cause a stock out? Has there been a disruption on the roads causing a delivery delay? Did a ship sail from a foreign port with my favorite product and it's delayed somewhere en route? Was it not loaded on the ship in the first place? Was there a hiccup along the way? Have there been disruptions on the roads? Did President Trump place extortionate tariffs on my product, my favorite product? Did something go wrong in the warehouse in which it was stored? Perhaps there was some disruption there. Or perhaps it's in a back room and it just hasn't gone on the shelf yet because the store employees haven't got it to the right location on the shelf. It's a problem, and it causes dissatisfaction with customers. It causes headaches with suppliers. And the critical question becomes, is this a one-off incident, a recurring issue, which might indicate a systemic problem, or is it a failure of supply chain strategy? In the digital age, the power of possibilities to improve supply chain performance is immense. We're able to order goods and services and have them delivered to our door in days, even same day for some products. For others, we may have to wait weeks, as goods manufactured overseas have to be transported using multimodal transport, trucks, trains, ships, and planes. The goods have to cross borders, and there may be tariffs to pay. Manufacturers with complex supply chains might incur tariffs more than once if assembly, sub-assembly components have to move between facilities and hubs, as in the case of automotives. So managing the supply chain and developing supply chain strategies is critical to cope with demand and retain customers, whether they be B2B, business to business, or business to consumer. In recent years, the term supply chain has moved from the lexicon of logistics professionals to the forefront of public and business discourse. Global disruptions, most notably the COVID-19 pandemic, exposed the intricate and often fragile networks that deliver everything from food to microchips, highlighting their profound importance to daily life and economic stability. This increased visibility reflects a fundamental shift in the corporate world. Supply chain management has evolved from a purely operational function focused on purchasing and logistics into a critical strategic discipline. Today, it's centered on high-level direction setting, the efficient allocation of resources, and the ultimate goal of customer satisfaction. Success in this new complex environment is no longer guaranteed by incremental operational improvements alone. It requires a comprehensive and strategic assessment of both emergent global risks and the transformative opportunities presented by new technologies. So I'm going to talk about these things in our discussion tonight. I'm going to talk about powering possibilities in global trade through intelligent supply chain strategies, which are demand-driven and customer-focused. We're going to touch on AI, regulation, risk, and uncertainty. And I'm going to introduce you, for a core part of the discussion, to my 7V model. And that's all about 7 variables that are very important to focus upon. And then we're going to talk about the complexity and control. And we're going to talk about digital transformation and virtual supply chains. Before I summarize everything, talking about strategic applications and the value of the 7V model. So hopefully that will be of interest to everybody listening tonight. I'll preface the discussion with this one slide, and I'll let you read that slide for yourself, because this is what the World Trade Organization has stated in its WTO report for 2025, and you may have heard from the Director General of the WTO last evening about some of these things. So I'm not going to repeat those things. I'm simply going to follow on from them and try and connect to them as we go. But certainly, it's very important that AI is an enabler and it doesn't actually create them and us in the process of what we really want, which is cooperation. We want collaboration, cooperation, and yes, we'll have competition, but the cooperation and collaboration can help competition for everybody too. So we're looking at those possibilities. And the regulatory frameworks, of course, give us regulatory pathways. We have to cope as a particular organization with the pathways. Governments are increasingly shaping supply chain behavior. We've got tariffs. I don't have to tell you too much about those because they're ongoing. It's all the time. And we've got all these reciprocal tariffs at silly rates all over the globe, and it's distorting global trade and it's distorting supply chains. It's disrupting supply chains. We've got critical mineral strategies. And I've put the UK, the United States, and India as examples of those countries where they've got a document which spells out what they're going to do to ensure that they can get hold of these critical minerals. And the critical minerals, you will know, are the 17 critical minerals that are on a list that people have designated as critical minerals for things like EVs and the energy future that we have. I did a very interesting interview with Madhu Hosadurga last year, and he works as the VP of AI for Schneider Electric. And Schneider Electric is the #1 supply chain company in the world, according to the Gartner list. And they've won this a few years on the trot. And of course, what they're interested in, you've probably got things in your home, in a device, in your electric system, which is made by Schneider, but you won't necessarily know because it's not a branded product. It's a part that might be a switch. It might be a sensor. It might be a simple thing like a thermostat in your heating system. But they make all kinds of goods. And the most interesting thing, I think, that came out of that discussion is the fact how they're working relentlessly to make a better world for everybody with the intelligence, the people, and the systems working together to move goods from one place in the world to another place in the world and to mitigate risk and avoid uncertainty in that process. And if you want to go and listen to that particular episode, you'll find it on my podcast, and it's still up, it's still live. And I would say if you're interested in critical minerals and you're interested in AI, it's certainly an episode to go and have a listen to. But those critical minerals I'm talking about, in case people don't know who are on this call, are things like lithium, cobalt, those sorts of minerals that are required for the future. It's battery technology dependent. Then we've got digital customs and traceability laws. And the Quad initiative is an initiative by 4 countries. It's the EU, well, 4, not countries, are they? It's trade areas, I suppose. There's a better way to describe them because it's the EU, which is a number of countries. It's Japan, it's the UK, and it's the United States. And they have initiatives to control cybersecurity, for example, or to develop integrated cybersecurity initiatives. They want circular supply chain strategies. They want to develop ESG traceability, that's environment, sustainability, and governance issues that they want to actually track through. And they want to mitigate risk from all these factors that can actually cause damage and disruption within supply chains. And supply chains play a big part in this particular area. And then we've got the sustainability mandates. We know that COP's taking place at the moment as we speak. We're climate change over in Brazil. And in Brazil, of course, there's deforestation taking place. And so sustainability is a big part of what people do. And the work that I do at Consuming Future is about sustainability, and it's about ethical supply chains, and it's about research into those areas and providing information based on global data to organizations and to research institutes that want to learn from what's happening in the world today. But part of the popularization of those activities is also the podcast and also the blog that I actually write, which was mentioned in the introduction when I was introduced. Organizations, as I say, have to negotiate these pathways, and they've got to balance cost with resilience. They've got to look at the risk. They've got to look at speed versus sustainability. They've got to look at global reach versus local sourcing. And there's been all this discussion in the past couple of years between organizations talking about, do we continue with our just-in-time global supply chains? Because some of those are broken now. And we have to think of ways to either fix them, or we have to develop different strategies that move them nearer to shore or to local sourcing. And if you think about the way the world operates, it's very difficult to unpick global supply chains and move things around. I remember when I was researching my episode on designed in California, made everywhere else, and that was a story put together about Apple. And if we look at Apple products, it's a very interesting case because over the past year, we've seen a big move away with Apple products away from China, moving towards India. They've shifted a lot of production capability to India, and they're continuing to do so. And the reason they've done that, well, you've guessed it, it's mainly because of the tariffs that the United States have placed on Chinese products, and particularly semiconductors, and of course, all the disputes over rare earth products that are going on currently. And the rare earths are not the 17 critical minerals we've talked about. Not all of them are rare earth, but a number of them are. I think there might be a larger number of critical minerals than the 17 I've said. I think it might be a bit higher than that, and I think the rare earths are part of that process, and they do constitute quite a number of units. I think that might be the 17, but I can't recall just offhand. I'd have to go and look at my notes, which I haven't got with me. So if we think about this, we've got those sorts of disruptions taking place. What can we do with our supply chain strategies? Well, we can do three things. We need a purpose. What are we trying to do? Well, we want to build resilience. That's one thing. We need operational efficiency. We want to make sure that things get to where they want to be or need to be smoothly and without too much friction in the supply chain. And some of the things that have caused friction, a lot of friction in the past year or two, have been things started in the UK with the Brexit situation. I don't want to unpick that one. That's a thorny issue. But certainly that caused a lot of friction in supply chains. And then we've had the COVID pandemic that caused friction in supply chains also because production units and capacity was limited because of the pandemic. And then we've had self-inflicted friction from other governments around the globe. It's not just the UK, it's not just the United States, although the United States has caused a lot of friction for everybody else in the world economy. So that is a serious issue and a serious problem. So we're under threat, we're under attack with this operational efficiency. We're also trying to drive long-term growth. A name of almost every government in the world wants growth. It's like a drug, isn't it, really? They want growth. Everybody needs growth. And the reason they want growth is they want the populations to be better off. And they want to raise standards of living. And that's a laudable aim. And it's an important aim. And those three strategies are all often underpinned by how we use technology, how we're able to grasp the technological innovations and turn those into tools for resilience, tools for efficiency, and tools for growth. So AI can do that. And we'll talk a little bit about how it's working in supply chains as we move through the talk. When we think about managing the supply chains, this comes from the US military when they were looking at their supply chains for defense equipment and those sorts of products. They use something called a VUCA framework. They talk about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And those things impact their ability to achieve their goals. It helps the leaders categorize and respond to the challenges that they face, such as resilience, such as efficiency, and keep cost under control. But I'm going to introduce you to my model this evening, which looks at these things in a more complex way. And it's the 7V model for value creation and risk management in modern supply chains. And we need to understand key variables that are at play. Now, perhaps an easy way to think about this and the significance of the model is to look at a mind map of how the model can actually be used. And this is sketched out from the supply chain strategies. You can see how we plan, how we develop the model to create value and mitigate risk, and how we use strategic application of that model to have a systematic approach to how we understand what's going on in our supply chains. And it helps to pinpoint vulnerability, mitigate risk, improve agility, responsiveness, because if we can identify the problem, we can search for the solutions, and the model systemizes the way we can actually do it. The boxes open up in this model as we move along, but I'm not going to take you through all the detail of how it opens up. Suffice to say, every model begins to look at the political risk, the commercial risk, the macroeconomic risk, and external risks. We begin by looking at interconnectedness. I don't know if everybody sees the world the way I do. I hope not, and I'm sure they don't. I'm sure they see things differently, but I see the world as an interconnected organism of collective systems. So I see the world that is connected by these systems and subsystems, and one of those systems is our supply chain system. It might not always seem like a system, but it's meant to be. And it has to be to work efficiently and to generate the strategic goals that we want to achieve. Volatility is at the center of everything in a supply chain. It causes problems. But before we get to the volatility, we have to know what's causing the volatility, or those 7 V's that you see listed. Volumes, the velocity, the value, the variety, the variability, visibility, and virtuality. And I'll take each one of those in turn. But before that, we have to take a step back and look at this interconnectedness. How does our supply chain fit into the environment, into our political frameworks, into our regulatory frameworks, into our economic macro conditions that we find ourselves? How does it fit into the social being of and the social nature of organizations and people? And how does technology link in to understand what's going on in that interconnected world? Well, I can hear the shouts coming over the screen right now. If you could speak to me, you'd be shouting over, well, of course, it's all connected. It's connected through social media. It's connected through computer systems. It's connected through people speaking to each other. It's connected in a variety of ways. So yes, there are what I call physical connections, but there are also virtual connections, which are important. And the virtual connections come about as a result of our technology, our use of technology. And they've improved supply chains no end. I woke up yesterday and I thought it was 1994. I think I was in Atlanta in 1994 at a World Textile Conference. And in 1994 in Atlanta, for the very first time, I came across something which you will know, called an RFID tag. That's a radio frequency identity tag. And they were employing it in the textile industry at that point in time, or thinking about employing it in shirt collars. They wanted to put these tags into shirt collars. So where you have the stiffener in the shirt collar, if you could put the tag in the shirt collar, what you could actually then do is read the data about the shirt, the fabric, how it was made, where it was made. It was for traceability. You could see traceability happening in the process. And that was very important. But that was in 1994, so that's 31 years ago now. It's moved on no end. These RFID tags were very expensive then. They're now very low cost. The cost of that technology has fallen. And of course, that's what happens with technology. So while we look at technology today and we say, it's too expensive to use, to employ, to do that, well, it won't be at some time, because as more people adopt the technology, the costs lower. So we're in an age now, and I think we truly are in the digital age. I mean, I used to write about the digital age in the 1990s, but I never expected to be where we are today in terms of how interconnected the world is and how connected the technology has become to make supply chains much more efficient. All the things we talked about doing in supply chains and that we wanted to do in supply chains have become a reality rather than a desirous aim. And that's what they were back in those days. We just wanted to get things smoother, to cut costs, to be efficient. And it was all about efficiency. But today it's about efficiency, it's about effectiveness, and it's about fairness, and it's about equity in that sense. And it's about ethics. Ethics play a very big part in supply chains, and we want everybody to have decent work and a decent human standard of living, and that's important. So it's important that people don't become like machines. We need machines, we need technology, but people have to have other things going on to be self-respectful and respectful of others. And so the ethics in this process of creating supply chains is very important. And it's something I talk about on the podcast from time to time. I've got a few episodes which talk about ethical supply chains and why they are so important. So let's take a look at volatility. We all know about volatility. I could take you back over the last couple of years. I'm not going to take you through all the detail, but if we went back to the Suez Canal, it was costing about $10 million a day, $10 billion a day with ships stuck in the Suez Canal for, I think it was about 10 days and all, that they actually blocked the canal. And that was a really costly exercise when we saw the Evergreen ship stuck in that Suez Canal for that length of time. And of course, it meant that ships coming from China with all those container boxes on had to go around the Horn of Africa. So they had to go around South Africa, and it added about 14 days to the trip time. So that was an expensive, although short-term, very disruptive incident, and it cost a lot of businesses much money in the process. So volatility changes all the time. Something can disrupt it. It might be an external factor. It might be a natural disaster. It might be a war. Or it could be some internal system dynamics, the things that Jay Forrester talked about in his book when he was talking about industrial dynamics a long time ago. And those sort of disruptions cause what people now talk of as the Forrester effect or the bullwhip in the supply chain. And as they move upstream in a supply chain, if you think about what a supply chain is, a supply chain, obviously, we begin with an origin, and the origin is often excavation, mining, it's agriculture, it's industrial processes. Then it's transformed, the materials that are generated from that process or those sets of processes is transformed into goods and services that people buy in various steps in a supply chain, and it goes on to an end customer. And then it goes on beyond the end customer, of course, to recycling. And that's where we get the circular supply chain locking in, because we need to make much more use of our waste materials. How much e-waste ends up in landfill and how much of it ends up in developing countries, because the developed world can't cope with the e-waste it's making. There's an important consideration in the process. So there are choices, going back to strategy, there are choices that we make. And the choices we make in the design of our supply chain, in the way in which we configure the hubs in the supply chain, has an impact on our environment. It has an impact on the way people see the world. Is it fair? Are employees safe? Is there diversity and equity in the process? And do we have governance? Is the corporate governance strong enough for compliance and risk management that prevents bribery and corruption in the supply chains? So those are important pillars of the ESG framework. And if you think about when we design things in, think about shipping, all the diesel that's pumped out of those ships that pollutes the atmosphere, the oceans, the carbon dioxide that's pumped out of planes, trains, whatever transport we decide to use. But these are choices we make. We can choose transport routes and transport modes that will be less impactful on our environment. And that's important to think about as well. That's just another view of supply chain risk using the V's. And you can see on that particular diagram. We've got the externalities, the disasters, we've got the value, how it's generated, we've got the operations, we've got the cost of capital, which comes into the equation. We've got virtuality. And when we think about virtuality, we might have digital products and services. We might have physical products and services. We might have virtual supply chains, digital twins, and so on. And those are very important tools in our armory. We talk about variety, variability, and visibility. I'm going to move on from that screen to talk us through those things. So we've got a systematic framework. It's this 7V model. It can change our configurations. It can change the way in which we see the world. And the model integrates multiple interconnected factors. So I've already talked about the interconnections, and I want to continue with those interconnections because that's how we create value through the interconnections. We understand supply chain dynamics, which I've talked about a little. And we manage variability and volume. We address variability. What does it mean, variability? We'll come to it shortly. In essence, it means anything that moves away from what we expect. That's it, in put simply. If we expect something to be of a standard quality, we don't expect it to be variable. We expect it to be standard. And managers can make informed strategies using an analysis of these factors. Globalization has made us think in different ways about how we configure supply chains. If we deglobalize, we'll have to rethink yet again. And many say that we will be rethinking. And I would argue we're rethinking all the time. We rethink every day because disruptions and the way in which the emergent issues come to the forefront make us think about how we deal with these supply chains continuously. We need to be agile in the way we think, and I don't think it's a world of globalization that just continues on a path that it always has. I don't think it's going to deglobalize in the way some commentators and analysts think it will. I think it will remain a global supply chain. It's just how global that supply chain will be is the question. When we look at volume, we're referring to quantity. And the quantity here is about scaling. Essentially, we're trying to scale. Volumes refer to the quantity of goods and services that move through the supply chain. And it's like a queuing problem, really, because we've got demand at one end of the funnel and we've got supply at the other end, and it needs to be balanced in some way. And the things that can balance the supply chain are the tools that we have at our fingertips. And one of those tools is, of course, technology in the form of artificial intelligence and in the way in which we manage demand signals and supply production. It has an impact on scaling. It has an impact on the way we allocate resources and the way in which we control costs. There'll be demand fluctuations, supply disruptions, prices will change, and there'll be risk mitigation. Velocity is about the speed at which things move through that supply chain. But it's not just about goods, and this is a very important point now. Supply chains don't just move goods through the system, although that's an important part of what they do. But they also move information. and information flow is key. It's critical for decision making. So when we decide on our strategies, if we have real-time information, we make better decisions than we would if we have to wait for data for weeks. And because we've got technology supporting our supply chain, we're also able to speed up and improve our cash flow. And that's important to keep the lifeblood of the business flowing. When it comes to complexity and control, there are 3 V's: variety, variability, and visibility. And those are perhaps some of the key things we need to just spend a little time on now. The range of offerings. Variety includes a broad range of products and services tailored to meet diverse customer demand and preferences. We've got the idea of customer diversity. Customers don't all want the same thing. They might want different things. And if they do, that puts pressure on a supply chain because it means that the variety that we have to hold in terms of our inventories will become larger. And we have to balance efficiency against that variety. Because if we go on producing everything that every customer wants, it will add cost to the supply chain. And that's why we have limits on ranges. Everybody places a limit on what they offer. You only have to look at supermarkets, for example, and there are limits to the ranges they hold. And those limits mean that they have to hold less inventory. So it's better to do that than the alternative. Variability comes in 3 ways. As I've said, I've already talked about product variability, and that's a quality issue, making sure that goods reach the right quality. But there's also an impact on production, because if we're variable in the operations, the steps that we take to produce goods and services, then the processes we use, if they're variable, may not always turn out to be what we expect every time. So there are choices there. Then there's managing variability itself, maintaining that consistent quality and consistent delivery times in the process. When it comes to visibility, this is where technology has really made a very big difference in the past few years. We can get this real-time monitoring. It allows continuous tracking of supply chains, and we're able to get immediate information about what's happening. It helps us make better decisions and manage our risks a lot better. And it also enables us to become far more responsive in the process. When it comes to virtuality, digital platforms in supply chains enable real-time communication, data sharing among supply chain partners. If you were to look back over the past couple of decades and you look at cases like Zara in retailing, they were able to manage their fast fashion supply chains through the process of real-time data sharing amongst their supply chain partners. Other companies have learned from what they did and from others too, and they've been able to create this real-time data flow. And one way in which they are now beginning to look at the data flow is through virtual supply chains, which often people refer to as digital twins. And digital twins effectively simulate what's happening in the physical supply chain. We can take a look at the virtual supply chain, which is an exact model of the physical supply chain, and we can throw disruptions into that model, or we can throw out a supplier off the model and see what impact it has on the whole chain. So this systems view, this systematic analysis of what's actually happening in the supply chain is key to formulating appropriate strategy and making better choices. We need to be adaptable to market change. We have to make sure that we've got operational scalability, and technology helps in these areas too. And you can see it's a very important aspect of making that business or that organization far more efficient. It improves responsiveness. And of course, the things that have made our lives different and our expectations too are different as customers, as organizations, because we're looking at how these sensors now pick up the data and help us understand through things like the Internet of Things or through AI analytics and automation in artificial intelligence processes. We can get advanced analytics, or through cloud real-time sharing. And of course, things, when we think of financial flows through the cloud, we can think of things like the blockchain, which has made it far more safe to transfer financial resources that way. So we're nearly at the end of this overview. Analyzing the 7 V's is important to pinpoint vulnerabilities, and it also is important for focusing on specific risks. And you might be thinking, well, how do you do this? Well, guess what? You start with conversations. And the way in which I've employed the model and used the model with organizations is by talking through issues, problems with people who are experiencing the problem, and to find out what they think they need to do and discuss the options available using the 7 V's. So what the 7V model actually does, it pinpoints where the issues are, and it makes them think in a more thoughtful, focused, and disciplined way about what the problem is. And they will articulate a general problem that becomes a specific problem by the time we've finished. And once we can identify the specifics, then we begin to think about how the numbers might be affected by the way in which the specification of the problem is achieved. And it might mean that we think about strategies designed to meet a specific customer need through the process. Might mean that we design tailored products and services or responsive deliveries. We're responsive to what's happening now. We're not reliant on the forecast. Forecasts, as we know, have been an important bedrock of supply chains. They still are in some cases, but not all cases, because the forecast is becoming more real time in its approach. We're able to see through things like virtual supply chains, the digital twins, things instantly and how the supply chain will be impacted. The problem is, for the small and medium-sized enterprise, the cost of developing this digital twin might be prohibitive presently. Remember, I talked about technology and cost. And while it might be prohibitive right now, in a few years' time, it may not be. And so it's important that people drive the idea of considering digital twins continuously until a time in which they can employ it if they're a smaller and medium-sized enterprise. It might be something they can think of. There are things that are unimaginable, or that were unimaginable a few years ago, that people would have access to in a small business. Now it's taken for granted that people are able to access databases, they're able to access the internet, they're able to do things in the ways in which we wouldn't have envisaged. But of course, in parts of the world, one of the still major problems is the interruption of energy flows and electricity. Having a consistent supply of electricity is important, but you can imagine that the demand for electricity is going through the roof around the world, and that puts different types of pressure in terms of our environmental considerations at risk. I'm not saying that they're not manageable. I think they are manageable, and I think we'll find ways to manage them through innovation and through new technology developments, because it was ever thus. So what we've got with our 7V model is a strategic model that can look at critical insights to guide organizations to make those better decisions. It can create supply chain efficiency and responsiveness, and it can drive value for the organization and for the customers who are at the end of the chain. So in summary, that's what it looks like. Comprehensive framework, value creation, risk management, and hopefully some competitive advantage is achieved by following the process. And some of the resources to help you, don't forget, those resources are available. You can take a look at the Chain Reaction podcast. I think there's about 300 episodes now, something like that. And I think there's a very interesting one for everybody who's on this call in a couple of weeks' time. I have an interview with Vidya Amarapala, and she was CEO of Resolink, which is a data information company in California. And Vidya started she's a serial entrepreneur, I would class her as right now. She started her new business called Accio. And what they're doing, they're working on 3D design out of basically print. They're printing hard to find products. So many companies, as you will know, have a necessity to hold inventory of spare parts, but they have to hold them for years. If you're in the aerospace industry, or you're in defense, or you're in an industry where there might be a 25-year life for a product, then you have to hold that inventory for 25 years. It's part of the original contract. It's compulsory in the process. And so it's a good idea. It's a good development, and I'm sure it will find a market, and it's already got finance. But that's one for you to stop by and have a listen to. But there are many others too. You'll find your own way through. I'm going to stop sharing at that point, and I'm going to ask if there are any questions.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor Hines, for that exciting yet very in-depth presentation. on what we consider to be one of the most transformative frameworks for supply chain. Thank you very much for sharing those very electric perspectives with us this evening. We are very grateful. I'll just do a very brief summary of what you covered before we welcome questions. Professor Hines spoke eloquently about the factors shaping global supply chain, identifying those key factors. He went ahead to explore the strategies for supply chain and then gave an in-depth explanation of the Hines 7V models. Providing us a framework to analyze the interconnectedness of supply chain from the macro to the macro conditions and vice versa, and how technology facilitates and power this interconnectedness. Very exciting, very, very wonderful. For us within the School of Law, we find this extremely transformative. Thank you very much for sharing those perspectives with us tonight. Please, we welcome questions. Make your questions as brief as possible, very direct and succinct. Thank you very much. Questions, please. If you intend to ask, just raise your hand so we see you. As we keep the questions coming, let me, I have one question for Professor. Professor, I'm a law. Okay, there's a question here. Before I let me take the back seat and welcome question from Made Karame. Made Karame, you can ask your question, please.
Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Yes, good evening, and thank you for the great presentation. Thank you so much. Actually, it's a very interesting subject about the supply chain, as it's the key factor for every company around the world. So my question is, I want to confirm, what do you think about having a product selection for materials before going through the supply chain process? A product selection tool that, as you mentioned during the presentation, that every single diversity of products, it adds cost to both manufacturers, customers, user, everyone. So having a AI tool or a product selection tool that can support to unify the products so it can make it more efficient for the users, companies, and the supply chain. I hope my question is clear.
Yeah, very clear. I think it's a really good idea is the answer. I think a product selection tool, and there are product selection tools that are out there, aren't there, for some industries. I mean, sourcing, I remember being in a New York office of a design company a few years, more than a few years. It must be about 20 years ago now. And they were looking at sourcing opportunities at that point in different parts of the world. And they had their buyers or their procurement officers looking at a very specific tool that they had to purchase fashion goods from different parts of the globe. And they were looking, they had simple things like a straightforward black dress or a shirt, and then they'd go through who are all the people that supply these goods. They'd get the list of people that they were sourcing from different products, and they'd say who's capable of making this product that our designers have come up with to actually get it in on cost and on time.
Exactly.
And so that was a product selection tool, but it was a primitive tool in a way. I shouldn't really say that. That's why I didn't say the name of the company in case they're listening. But it was a primitive tool, but it was an important tool. And I think with AI, we've now got the prospect of making these tools far more refined and far more data and far more information can be gleaned from that system. So I think it's a really good idea. I think I think there will be more and more of these product selection tools, and I think it's a very important thing to make supply chains efficient, because you want to keep the cost down, you want to make it efficient, and you want to get the goods to the customers want to buy. So perhaps you start with the customer on your product tool. There's a novel
Thank you.
idea, isn't it?
Thank you so much. Actually, it's part of my research. That's what I'm thinking about, as it's going, as you said, to bring the cost down and save the time for the manufacturer and the user. Thank you so much, Professor Tony. I appreciate your response.
Most welcome, Manji.
Yes, thank you, Maji, for that brilliant question. Thanks, Professor, for
Thank you, Doctor.
providing an answer. Thank you. We have another question from, this time, Dr. Amarapala, please. Dr. Amarapala, your question.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor, for wonderful, very informative presentation this evening, Professor Hines, and thank you for the opportunity for me to ask a question this evening, Dr. Uhumuavbi. And I have just one question. Of course, you have basically covered the periphery of it. You were bringing in, I'm talking about the risk. I'm just trying to ask a question about supply chain management, risk mitigation and management. You were talking about US military is looking at a number of different risk factors. And how do how do you propose to keep the supply chain risk minimized so that you won't get shocks? Of course, we were talking about climate change, man-made disasters, natural disasters, so on and so forth. So what is the best model to minimize the such risks?
Well, I would say, wouldn't I, that the 7V model would be the best model to look at the risk, because those 7Vs look at 7 different types of risk. Volatility is a risk, but what's behind the volatility is the assessment that has to be made. And the way in which, if you were to look at my supply chain strategy book, and I think it's in chapter 2 where I discuss risk at length, I think the whole chapter's on risk. And there is a way in which you can assign qualitative insights to the risk and come up with a number, a score, that generates the risk that you have identified in your particular supply chain. It's far too detailed and too complex to go into any depth in answer to your question, but there are ways to do it. But always it's the quality of the data that's important, and the ability to pinpoint the vulnerabilities in the supply chain. But risk mitigation is a very important part of this process. But it's not just in the military, it's in every business, it's in every organization. There is risk, and it's focusing on the risks that are most important. We have 7 Vs. Not all those Vs will be risks for any single organization. Some of them may be a lesser risk. Some of them will be a far more important risk. And it's about being able to evaluate and make judgments about the priority that you need to give to the risk element. I hope that answered partially the question.
Thank you very much. I think finally the AI is going to help us a lot to reduce the risk factor, because all those data modeling will be done by AI, so that we will have less risk if you really use the right tool in this, I guess. And thank you very much, Professor Hines, and Professor Celestine Nivendi. Thank you so much for inviting me to join, and it was very, very informative, fruitful, and thank you everyone.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Amarapala, for that insightful question, and thank you, Professor Hines. In fact, Dr. Amarapala just took the question out of my mouth, because essentially, that was essentially the question I was going to ask. I was going to ask about AI, data, and sustainability, and the ideas and how they affect supply chain efficiency and effectiveness. I think
probably great minds think alike, and you were reading my mind, or I was reading your mind.
Thank you so much. These issues are crucial, so I guess we'll work together on that. Excellent. Thank you so much, colleagues.
Thank you.
It's been a fascinating night. We've had an explosion of intellectual robustness flowing, and you can see it reflected in the smiles I see on the screen this evening. It's been amazing. We've really enjoyed this feast. Without wasting much of our time now, because I know the guest, our special guest, is already set to go. We have a token for you, sir. It's our tradition here in the university, and as part of our culture here with this talk series that has been on now for almost a decade, we always appreciate special guests like you. So I'll be ceding the floor now to our host, Professor Celestine Wendy, to share our hospitality. Thank you very much. Professor Celestine. Professor Celestine.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, Professor Hines. Thank you for agreeing first to, to come in and deliver this speech, and then your vast experience is also shown. We appreciate you so much. And just like the WTO DG said yesterday, that a whole lot of AI and supply chain. So today you actually gave more practical things to what WTO is working on in terms of AI. So we just want to say thank you for coming, and then quick to give you what we normally send to our people. And can everybody see this?
It's not showing. Okay, yes.
Okay.
It's
yes. So we just want to say thank you. This is our November to Remember e-plaque, to you. We'll send that to you to say thank you. We appreciate so much. And then we'll also have the video of this program and then circulated, and ask people to tune in into your podcast. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining today. We have been a kind of much more stricter, because of what happened yesterday. So a whole lot of people were bounced. Please, tomorrow is another day. Make sure that you have your double names, your full names will be there. If not, nobody will allow you inside. We want to know who is coming in, and then so it's easier to know our enemies also, know what to prevent. Thank you so much, Professor Hines. Back to
thank you, Celestine.
Back to the moderator.
Oh, thank you very much, Professor. Thank you. We also appreciate you. Please sign up to Professor Hines' handle, please, because this is important. This is a crusade. His model is extremely interesting. I find it useful, and I will share these insights with my students here in the School of Law. So please follow him, and I'll follow him personally, because there's so much to learn from him, especially in the manner in which he has developed a framework that thoroughly explores supply chain end to end. Thank you very much. So I want to say it has been a splendid evening. We've thoroughly enjoyed ourselves, and it's time to go. Every good thing has an end, and we've just gotten to the end of this. So on behalf of the university, on behalf of the head of the center, Professor Wendy, and on behalf of the head of the entire school, Sam Johnson, we are saying thank you so much to everyone who has participated in this. Please, I would want us to, with a round of applause for Professor Hines, our special guest, leave knowing that we have had a time well spent tonight. Thank you so much, and good night.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
Night.
Nice to meet everyone.
Yes, good night.
Yeah,
Thank you.
good night.
Yeah.